You say you want truth, but I wonder, do you know what that costs? The unconscious does not speak in words. It whispers in symptoms. It stains your dreams. It hides behind your virtues and bleeds through your silence. And the part of you that asks for healing often works the hardest to remain unhealed. There is something inside you that remembers what you were never allowed to say. It remembers everything though you forgot. It buries pain under routine. It buries longing under pride. It buries guilt beneath perfection. But repression is not deletion. It is relocation. That which cannot be tolerated in daylight lives on in shadow. You think you moved on, but it still breathes beneath your skin. That shame you swallowed, that desire you disowned, that rage you smiled through, they did not disappear. They simply adapted, like a wounded animal curling beneath the floorboards of your personality, waiting. The self you show to the world was built atop ruins, and you call it identity. But it is armor. It is compromise. It is survival, made to look like selfhood. We construct the ego to function, not to feel. It is the decoy we use to negotiate with the unbearable. And yet nothing repressed stays buried. The unconscious will speak. It will speak through the body, through the breakdown, through the chronic exhaustion that defies explanation, through the relationship you sabotage, through the fantasy you chase, and the ache that remains after you get it. You wonder why you're tired. You wonder why nothing satisfies. The answer is simple, though not easy, because part of you is still fighting to forget what another part of you refuses to release. There is no healing without confrontation, no freedom without recognition, no peace without war between who you were told to be and who you truly are. We were not raised to be whole. We were raised to be manageable, to be pleasing, to be acceptable. And so we edited ourselves, silenced ourselves, carved ourselves into masks that others could love. And now we wonder why we feel like strangers in our own lives. To survive, we made deals with pain. We said, I won't speak if you let me stay. I won't feel if you let me belong. And pain kept its end of the bargain by becoming invisible. But invisible pain is not harmless. It becomes compulsive. It becomes repetition. You relive what you don't resolve. You return to the scene of the original wound, not because you want to suffer, but because something in you hopes to rewrite the ending. This is the compulsion to repeat the tragic hope of the unconscious. We want to believe time heals, but time does not heal what the psyche refuses to see. Time only hardens the mask. And one day, you wake up and realize the persona you've crafted for survival is the same one suffocating you. You call it anxiety. You call it burnout. You call it imposter syndrome. But underneath the diagnosis is something older, something ancient. The fear of being seen in your unedited state. The terror that if you stop performing, you will vanish. The ego would rather suffer than surrender control. It is loyal to its delusions. It defends the wound it was built around. But the truth, it does not flatter the ego. It humiliates it. It strips away its stories. And without those stories, who are you? To know yourself is not to add more labels. It is to lose the ones that kept you safe. It is to descend not into chaos, but into honesty, into memory, into pain, and through pain, into coherence. This is the death the ego fears, the death of its fictions, the death of the curated self. But make no mistake, if you do not kill the old self, it will kill you, slowly, quietly, through stagnation, through endless distraction, through a life lived on autopilot. You cannot become who you are without grieving who you were trained to be. You must unlearn the silence you swallowed. You must sit with the ghosts you buried in your nervous system. You must listen to what you repressed, not to judge it, not to fix it, but to acknowledge it. Because what you repress does not vanish. It waits. It waits for moments of weakness, for cracks in the facade. And when it returns, you won't recognize it as yourself. You'll call it sabotage. You'll call it dysfunction. But it is simply the truth breaking through denial. And so the descent begins. Not toward healing, but toward seeing, toward naming, toward bearing the weight of what has always been there, shaping your choices from beneath your awareness. There is no redemption in this process, only honesty, only the quiet dignity of facing what has been exiled within you. This is not self-help. This is a psychoanalytic process, an uncovering of the unconscious forces shaping the life you built to shield yourself from intolerable conflicts. But now the old strategies don't work. The distractions feel hollow. The validation doesn't land, because somewhere inside, the psyche is done pretending. It is ready to be seen, even if it terrifies you, especially because it terrifies you. The return to the unconscious is not a regression. It is a return to origin, to the place where the first fracture occurred, where desire split from morality, where need was called weakness, where pain became performance. And in this return, you will not find clarity. You will find contradiction. You will find ambivalence. You will find that love and resentment can occupy the same breath, that guilt can bind more than hate. That safety can feel like a prison when it was bought with silence. To reclaim the self, you must risk everything that kept you invisible. You must allow the truth to ruin your old life, the roles, the routines, the relationships that require your numbness to persist. You must become disloyal to your survival strategies. You must betray the voice that tells you to be quiet, to stay small, to be good. Because beneath the ego's fear is the psyche's demand to be known, not admired, not envied, not fixed, but known. And to be known, you must stop performing. You must stop editing your grief. You must speak in the language of your scars, not for the world, but for yourself. This is not catharsis. It is confrontation. It is the slow, brutal work of remembering what you swore you'd forget, of feeling what you've anesthetized for decades, of standing in the ruins of the false self and refusing to rebuild. You will lose people, you will lose illusions, you will lose certainty, but in that loss, you may find something harder to name, something closer to truth. And the truth is this: you do not need to become someone else. You need to stop betraying who you already are. But to do that, the old self must die. The self that apologized for existing. The self that smiled through rage. The self that performed instead of feeling. Do not attempt to destroy the old self. Rather, bring the repressed desires and unresolved conflicts into consciousness, where they can be analyzed and worked through. Because the real you has been waiting for you to choose truth over approval, depth over comfort, freedom over familiarity. And the only way forward is down. But descent is not a fall, it is a remembering, a re-encounter with what the psyche sealed off to preserve coherence. The mind, after all, is not built for truth. It is built for survival. And survival demanded forgetting. It demanded that we disown the unacceptable, bury the unbearable, smile while bleeding. We became functional, ghost-haunted, not by the past, but by the parts of ourselves we abandoned to escape it. And now, the buried returns not in memories, but in symptoms. In the panic that comes without cause. In the rage that startles you with its intensity. In the intimacy that repels you, even as you ache for it. You fear what is inside because you built your entire life on not knowing it. The mask is familiar. It has served you. It helped you belong. It helped you earn love, or what resembled love. But the mask cannot feel. It cannot grieve. It cannot breathe. And you still alive behind it, tar suffocating. You wonder why it hurts to be seen, why it feels dangerous to rest, why connection tastes like risk. Because you have only known connection through distortion, through compliance, adaptation, performance. The real self never entered the room. It waited quietly, in the dark, uninvited, unacknowledged, unchanged. And that is what must return, not the polished self, not the strategic self, but the forbidden one. The one who cried before you learned to numb, the one who raged before you learned to please, the one who longed without shame. You buried them, thinking they were the problem. But they were the pulse of your humanity. The body remembers what the mind denies. It aches in the places where truth was replaced by tolerance. And eventually, even the body begins to protest. Symptoms become signals. Fatigue becomes language. Depression becomes evidence in it of brokenness, but of blockage. The psyche does not break its signals. And if you listen, if you do not flinch, you begin to decode the message. I am not tired. I am silenced. I am not numb. I am armored. I am not lost. I am buried. You think you are afraid of pain, but pain is not the enemy. It is the testimony. It is the residue of truth. What you fear is feeling, because feeling means reckoning, and reckoning means change. Not in the world, but in you. The death of oneself and the emergence of another. Not better, not healed, but truer, more honest, more whole. You are not broken. You need interpretation, someone to help you uncover the hidden meanings and unconscious conflicts expressed through your symptoms and dreams. You need to be met in the places you've hidden. You need to stop mistaking function for freedom. You need to stop confusing numbness with peace. The psyche cannot thrive in captivity. It was never meant to be edited for consumption. It was never meant to be a brand. It was meant to erupt, to pulse, to burn, to mourn. But mourning cannot occur without recognition. And recognition means admitting that your life was shaped by what you could not say, what you could not want, what you could not grieve. And so, your choices were not choices. They were defenses. They were desperate negotiations between truth and belonging. And now, you are asked to break the contract, to risk disconnection from what you built in order to reconnect with what you are. There is no safety in this process. There is only risk, and there is no roadmap, only descent, deeper, into memory, into contradiction, into the scream you swallowed to be loved, into the no you never got to say, into the desire that was turned into shame, into the rage that became illness, into the silence that became your voice. This is the work, not ascension, not transcendence, but descent into the flesh, into the dream, into the wound. You will not return with answers. You will not return the same. You will return stripped, unmasked, terrifyingly alive. The world may not recognize you. It may call you selfish, dramatic, broken, but they are talking to the version of you that made them comfortable, not the one who returned from the underworld. That one does not seek approval. That one seeks truth. That one does not ask permission to exist. And still you will be tempted to rebuild the mask, to retreat, to pretend you didn't feel what you felt, to make it palatable, to soften the sharpness. Don't. You didn't survive to perform. You descended to remember, to reclaim, to begin it again, but finally. And so you walk alone, but not abandoned, with fear, but not in denial, into the echo chamber of your psyche, where every silence is sacred, every scar is scripture, and every symptom is a prophecy of what the false self could no longer contain. Kill the old self not to become new, but to become real, to meet your reflection without apology, to stand unshaken in the ruins and whisper, I'm still here, not healed, not pure, not whole, but finally here. And here is not a destination. It is a confrontation with the unfinished, the unspoken, the unspeakable. To arrive here is to enter the threshold where time collapses, where the past surges forward in the body's tremor, in the stomach's tightness, in the dream that repeats itself with silent violence. You are not in the present. You are in the echo of a history that never resolved. And the unconscious does not care about chronology. It cares about charge, about conflict, about what still burns underneath your practiced calm. Do not mistake coherence for health. Some structures of the self are perfectly logical yet entirely built upon repression. You've learned to function in contradiction, to smile while suffocating, to care for others while abandoning your own voice. You call it strength, but is it? Or is it submission dressed as grace? Is it adaptation disguised as virtue? This is why so many break down when things finally become good. When the chaos stops, when the struggle ends, the mind has fewer distractions, and the buried begins to surface. Because it was never peace you were avoiding. It was stillness. And in stillness, the suppressed speaks. What you thought you'd outrun starts knocking from the inside. The truth you evaded begins to leak, not in sentences, but in dread, in disconnection, in the quiet terror that you built something beautiful on top of an emotional graveyard. You cannot build a life of truth upon denial. The foundation will rot, the cracks will widen, and one day you will wake up and realize that everything you created was built to keep the real you out. And then what will you protect? There is no healing without death, not of the body, but of the lie. The lie you lived, the role you inherited, the identity that felt safe but wasn't real. That is the sacrifice. To let go of who you needed to be, so you can make room for who you actually are. And that real self, it is not comfortable. It is not convenient. It will embarrass you. It will disrupt your relationships. It will say things you were taught never to say. But it is the only part of you that was never broken. You don't recover the real self. You uncover it. You peel away the performances. You stop gaslighting your own instincts. You notice how often you betray your truth to be digestible. How often you reach for control because freedom feels foreign. How often you collapse your boundaries in the name of love and call it compassion. There is a violence in this world that does not come with bruises. It comes with expectations, with roles, with scripts, with smiles. And you learn to participate in that violence by editing yourself out of your own experience. But the psyche remembers, and it will not rest until you do. To reclaim yourself is not a moment. It is a series of betrayals against your conditioning, against the voices in your head that don't belong to you, against the inherited shame that shaped your desires. You must betray them all, not to be cruel, but to be free. This betrayal is sacred. It is the return to inner authority. It is the dethroning of internalized oppressors. It is the refusal to apologize for your pain. And yes, you will be misunderstood, especially by the parts of yourself still loyal to the old code, the people you served, the personas you wore, the identities you clung to. But remember, those masks were never love. They were terms, conditions, contracts written in silence. And silence is not peace. It is obedience. It is fear disguised as composure. It is trauma ritualized into personality. And still the world will ask you to go back, to shrink, to smile, to explain your pain in ways that don't make others uncomfortable. Do not go back. The cost is too high. You will lose access to your own depth. You will confuse numbness with maturity. You will call it resilience when it is only repression. There is another way. It begins with truth. Brutal, beautiful, unbearable truth. It begins with admitting that you are tired of pretending, that you're tired of being strong, that you're tired of surviving in costumes. And beneath that tiredness, there is a voice, a small, steady, unapologetic voice. It does not scream. It does not bargain. It does not justify. It simply says, I am. That voice is you, before the edits, before the training, before the masks. And it has waited patiently in the darkest chambers of your soul for you to return. Return, not to fix, but to witness, to kneel before the ashes and say, I see you. I won't abandon you again. You will want to run. You will want to sedate. You will want to make it poetic or productive or palatable. But real transformation does not care how it looks. It only asks, will you stay? Will you stay when the grief swells like a wave? Will you stay when the old self screams to be resurrected? Will you stay when no one claps, when no one sees, when no one understands? To stay. Not because it's noble, not because it's spiritual, but because the only alternative is to continue the lie, and the lie is killing you. This is the work. This is the descent. It is ugly. It is raw. It is slow. But beneath the ruin, there is soil. And beneath the guilt, there is longing. And beneath the fear, there is life. Not the life you were given, the life you were denied. Kill the old self, or be killed by it. Not in one dramatic moment, but in the small betrayals of your truth. In the quiet suffering you normalize. In the half-lived days and the silenced nights. Kill the old self, not with hatred, but with clarity, and with the courage to begin again, not as someone new, but as someone real. And what is real, if not the part of you that refused to disappear, even when everything in your environment asked you to vanish? What is real, if not the fragment that watched the rest of you adapt, contort, betray itself to survive yet stayed untouched beneath the wreckage? It never left. It waited through the betrayals, through the performative joy, through the roles you wore like armor, and the lies you told with your smile. It watched, silently, as the surface grew stronger and the core grew lonelier. That loneliness is not emptiness. It is the absence of self. The soul's protest against a life lived in exile from one's own essence. You keep looking for connection, for purpose, for belonging, but these cannot be manufactured through performance. They cannot be summoned through perfection. They only arrive when you return to what was cast out, when you stop offering fragments of yourself in exchange for love, when you risk bringing your whole being into the room, knowing it may not be accepted, and it won't be, not by everyone, perhaps not by anyone at first. But that's not the point. The point is not approval. The point is presence. The point is that you were never meant to disappear into roles. You were meant to disturb, to disrupt, to discomfort, even yourself. Because discomfort is the signal that the false self is cracking, and through the cracks, something real emerges. This emergence is not glorious. It is not cinematic. It is grief-stricken, often ugly. You cry not for what happened, but for the years you couldn't cry, for the intimacy you abandoned to be good, for the words you swallowed so others could stay comfortable, for the inner world you neglected while decorating the outer one. Grieve, not to release the past, but to reclaim your relationship to it. Grieve, because every adaptation cost you something. Grieve, because you deserve to feel the full weight of your existence, without edits, without anesthetic, without turning it into a story for others to understand. Some truths are not for translation. Some wounds are not for display. Some parts of you must be reclaimed in silence, through raw contact with what was once unbearable. And as you grieve, do not reach for conclusions. Let the questions remain open. Let the ambiguity stay sharp. The psyche doesn't heal through answers, it heals through contact, through recognition, through staying present with what was once forbidden. You don't need to resolve everything. You need to stop running from what's unresolved. And yes, you will feel like you are losing your mind, because the mind you built was designed to protect you from this exact confrontation. It will resist. It will bargain. It will tempt you with old distractions, familiar stories, identities that made you feel in control. Don't follow. Let them pass like weather. Let them collapse. You are not your defenses. You are not your trauma. You are not your reputation. You are what's left when all of that falls away. And that self, it is wild. It is unruly. It does not want to be fixed. It wants to be seen. Not through the lens of pathology, not as a problem to be solved, but as a truth to be honored. This is not recovery. It is the painstaking psychoanalytic work of bringing unconscious conflicts and resistances into awareness. Internal, silent, relentless. A return to the inner temple, long abandoned, long desecrated by self-neglect. You step into that sacred space not as a pilgrim but as a witness to the child you left behind, to the rage you never legitimized, to the erotic energy you repressed for the sake of acceptability, to the full range of your unfiltered humanity. And here, finally, you meet yourself. Not the curated self, not the conceptual self, but the one who has been waiting all along, the one who never asked for perfection-only permission. Permission to feel, permission to ache, permission to want, permission to not make sense. Give that permission, not once, but daily. In every moment you choose truth over presentation. In every interaction where you don't abandon yourself to keep the peace. In every breath where you reclaim your inner authority. You do not owe the world a carefully constructed mask. What you owe yourself is the uncovering of the unconscious truths shaping your life. And that truth will never be tidy. It will never be universally acceptable, but it will be yours. And that, at last, is freedom. Not the freedom of detachment, not the freedom of having it all together, but the freedom to inhabit your own soul, to stop performing, to stop asking who you need to be, and to simply be. This is the death of the old self, the self who thought love required silence, who thought worth required pain, who thought belonging required disappearance. Let it be. Let the lies rot. Let the mask disintegrate. Let the numbness melt into tears you forgot how to cry. And when it hurts good, That is your nervous system waking up. That is your truth shaking off the sedative of performance. That is your life returning from exile. Stay with it. Stay until the grief transforms into understanding. Stay until the ache reveals the unconscious conflicts it has masked. Stay until the silence births a voice you have never heard before but instantly recognize as your own. And when that voice finally speaks, do not rush to explain it, to translate it, to tame it. Let it echo. Let it rupture the old agreements. Let it tear through every identity that was stitched together by fear, because it does not speak the language of your conditioning. It speaks the language of your origin, of who you were before the world told you who to be. You will feel disoriented, not because you are lost, but because you are no longer mapping yourself through others' expectations. You are learning to navigate by instinct, not instruction. And that is terrifying, because instinct doesn't flatter the ego. It demands sacrifice. It demands solitude. It demands you stop pretending you don't know what you know. You know. You've always known. The truth didn't arrive. It was revealed when you stopped protecting yourself from it. And now, what remains? A ruin, perhaps. A soul stripped bare. A life no longer held together by performance, but by presence. There will be grief, of course, but also stillness. And in that stillness, something sacred. Not a new identity, but the end of self-betrayal. You will live differently now, not loudly, not grandly, but truly. You will say no without explanation. You will rest without guilt. You will feel without censoring. You will choose relationships that don't require your silence. You will stop confusing abandonment with loyalty. And you will stop killing yourself to be loved. Because the old self is dead. The self that bartered authenticity for attachment. The self that believed invisibility was safety. The self that called repression strength. You buried it with your own hands. Not in hatred, but in mercy. And from that burial rises something that cannot be named, only lived. You are not fixed. You are not healed. You are real. And that is enough.